Act 1. I didn't kiss him because I wanted to. Look, before anything else, if you're the type who drops stories halfway through and then complains later that the ending came out of nowhere, maybe stick around this time. Or don't. I'm not your dad. But this gets complicated fast. I'm Han Jiwon, and if I'm being honest, none of this should have happened to me. I'm not dramatic. I don't chase trouble. I don't even like people knowing my name if it can be avoided. My whole survival method at Hanoi University was simple. Sit quietly, do my work, leave before anyone decides I'm interesting. It worked for 2 years. Then CO Taeyoon opened his mouth in Professor Min's seminar. That classroom always smelled weird, like old carpet mixed with someone's citrus cologne that never quite faded. I sat in my usual seat near the window, the one that rattled when trucks passed outside, and tried to stay awake while the radiator hissed like it was dying slowly out of spite. Taeyoon was talking. Of course he was. He always talked like he'd already rehearsed the version of himself everyone wanted. Calm voice, straight posture, hands folded like he respected furniture. The kind of guy who probably irons his t-shirts. The kind of guy parents point at and say, "Why can't you be more like him?" He was explaining social conformity, which was almost funny considering he looked like conformity's final boss. And then he dropped a statistic that was just wrong. Now, well, there are 2 schools of thought wrong. Just dead. Outdated. Incorrect. I knew because I'd written a paper on it last semester and nearly lost my mind digging through journals. I tried to ignore it. I really did. I chewed on my pen so hard, I tasted plastic and thought briefly about whether that was bad for me long term. Then Professor Min did that thing where he looks over his glasses like he's bored and disappointed at the same time. Any opposing views? Silence. I remember thinking about my laundry, about the sock I lost last week and still hadn't found, about literally anything except raising my hand. And then I spoke anyway. That's not right. I swear my voice sounded louder than it should have. Taeyoon turned around slowly. Not angry, just curious, like someone noticing a crack in glass. I explained. I corrected him. Professor Min nodded. Someone behind me muttered, "Oh." Taeyoon smiled the whole time, but it wasn't friendly. It was the kind of smile people wear when they're deciding whether you're a threat. I won the argument. I lost peace. After that, he noticed me. Not loudly. Not enough to call it harassment. Just enough to make me uncomfortable. He leaned too close in hallways. Asked questions that sounded polite, but felt like pressure. Looked at me like he was trying to figure out which part of me didn't belong. I told myself I was imagining it. I wasn't. The day it happened, the day I kissed him, I was already running on fumes. I'd slept maybe 3 hours. My coffee was cold by the time I remembered to drink it. Someone in the dorm had set off the fire alarm at 6 a.m. and never apologized. I was in my locker, fighting with the door, because it always stuck unless you hit it just right. Then Taehyun was there, leaning, relaxed. Too close. Morning Jae-won, leaning, relaxed, too close. Morning Jae-won, he said like we were friends. Something in my chest tightened. I don't know why that bothered me more than the teasing ever did. He asked about my weekend. Casual, soft voice, silk on the surface, sandpaper underneath. I remember thinking very clearly, I need him to stop talking. Not forever. Just right then. I didn't think about consequences. I didn't think about cameras. I didn't think about the fact that my breath tasted like instant coffee and regret. I leaned in. It was bad. Worse than bad. Our teeth clicked. I think I bumped his nose. It was awkward and fast, and absolutely not romantic. The hallway went quiet anyway, not movie quiet, awkward quiet, like when a glass shatters in a restaurant. Everyone pretends not to stare. Taehyun froze. Then he shoved me back, not violent, just sharp enough to draw a line. What the hell is wrong with you?" he said. And his face wasn't angry so much as shaken. He walked away like he'd just been handed a problem he didn't know how to solve. Someone laughed. Someone else whispered my name like it tasted strange. I didn't eat lunch. I couldn't. By the next morning, the video was everywhere. I couldn't. By the next morning, the video was everywhere. People I'd never spoken to had opinions about my sexuality, my intentions, my mental health. Taehyun didn't confront me. He didn't insult me. He watched me. And when Professor Min announced a mandatory partner project and said his name, then mine back to back, I realized something awful. That kiss wasn't the climax. It was the opening mistake. And CO Taeyoon wasn't done with me yet. Act 2. Forced proximity is a cruel joke. If Act 1 was the public disaster, Act 2 was the quiet punishment. The kind that doesn't bruise, but sticks under your skin. I thought things would explode after the kiss. Shouting, accusations. Maybe Taeyun cornering me somewhere dramatic like in front of the vending machines or outside the library where everyone pretends not to eavesdrop. None of that happened. What happened was worse. He ignored me. Not in the normal way people ignore you, no. This was intentional. Precise. Like he'd drawn a line through the air and decided I existed on the other side of it. He didn't look at me. Didn't acknowledge me. Didn't even do the passive-aggressive thing where you look through someone. Except, sometimes he did look. I'd feel it before I saw it. That prickling at the back of your neck that makes you want to check your reflection in a window just to make sure you're still real. I'd glance up and there he'd be, watching me like he was trying to remember something important and failing. Then Professor Min ruined everything. We were 10 minutes in a class when he clapped his hands once, sharp and loud enough to make someone in the front row flinch. Partner project, he said. Mandatory. I'll assign pairs. My stomach dropped immediately. I don't know why. I hadn't even let myself think about the possibility. That was my mistake. He read names off his tablet. Monotone. Careless. People relaxed when they got France. Groaned when they didn't. Then he said, "See you, Taehyun." I didn't breathe. And Han Jaiwan. Someone behind me actually whispered, "No way." I stare at my desk like if I concentrated hard enough, it would open up and swallow me whole. Tan's pen slipped out of his hand and hit the floor. The sound was stupidly loud. He didn't move to pick it up right away. When he did, his jaw was tight enough that it looked painful. Professor Min, oblivious as ever, gestured. "Sit together." We ended up side by side, close enough that I could feel heat coming off him. He smelled clean, like soap and something sharper underneath. He smelled clean, like soap and something sharper underneath. I hated that I noticed. He didn't speak, just tapped his thumb against his notebook over and over, like he was counting something invisible. When the bell rang, I stood up fast, ready to bolt. He grabbed my wrist. Not rough, not gentle either, just firm enough to stop me. "We'll work at your place," he said quietly. I blinked. "What? Your place?" He repeated, already letting go like the decision had been made without me. "Text me the address." And then he walked away. I stared at my wrist for a stupid amount of time afterward, like it might explain something if I looked hard enough. I told Sun Ho about it at lunch. He nearly choked on his rice. "At your place," he said. "Alone?" "Ji-won, that's not a study session. That's the opening scene of a horror movie. It's just a project," I muttered. He gave me a look that said he'd known me too long to believe that. Taeyun showed up exactly on time. That alone made me nervous. People like him are never late. We walked from campus to my apartment in silence. Not comfortable silence. The kind where every step feels too loud. My building smelled like someone had burned toast 3 floors up. The elevator groaned like it hated its job. When I unlocked the door, he hesitated. Just for a second. His eyes flicked around like he was bracing himself. My place isn't impressive. Small. Slightly cluttered. Books stacked where they shouldn't be. A chip mug I keep meaning to throw out, but don't. He noticed everything. We sat at the table, opened our laptops, pretended to work. 20 minutes passed like that before he finally spoke. "Don't do that again." I closed my laptop slowly. I wasn't planning to. Good. The word landed wrong. Too flat. Like it wasn't the truth. Silence stretched again, uncomfortable and thick. Then he surprised me. "Why did you correct me?" he asked. A frown. "In class. Sophomore year," he said. "Statistics." I stared at him. "You remember that?" He didn't answer. Rubbed the back of his neck instead. That was when I realized something unsettling. He hadn't targeted me randomly. He'd chosen me. I was still processing that when he asked, "Why did you kiss me?" the question felt too sharp, too sudden. My brain short-circuited. "I don't know," I said. He looked at me for a long second. Liar. He stood up immediately after, grabbing his bag like he'd stayed too long. I should go. The door closed behind him before I could say anything else. The next time we met, his phone rang. I wasn't trying to listen, but the walls in my apartment are thin and his voice changed. "Yes, sir. I know. No, I won't mess it up." When he came back inside, his face looked empty. Not angry. Not cold. Just drained. "That was your dad?" I asked without thinking. "I don't want to talk about it." I nodded, went back to typing. 10 minutes later, he said quietly, "You want me to be perfect?" The words hung there, fragile. I didn't answer, didn't know how. And when he left that night, I realized something else I didn't want to admit. I wasn't scared of him anymore. I was worried, and that was when things really started to go wrong. Act 3. The basement was a bad idea. I should have said no. That's the truth. I knew it the second his name lit up my phone on Saturday afternoon, like my body reacted before my brain even caught up. "Taeyun, come over, Taeyun. We need to finish the project." No please. No context. No address, because apparently I was just supposed to know, which I did. Everyone knew where CO Taeyun lived. His house sat at the edge of the rich neighborhood, like it was daring you to stare too long. White walls, perfect hedges, the kind of place that smelled like money and rules. I stared at the message for a full minute, thumb hovering over the screen, thinking about literally anything else I could do instead. Laundry, grocery shopping, reorganizing my bookshelf by height for no reason. I went anyway. That's how you know you're already in trouble. He told me to use the basement door, not the front. The basement. I remember thinking this is how people disappear in crime documentaries. The basement was cold. Not damp, not creepy, just sterile. Fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead. Shelves lined with trophies. Medals. Certificates. Everything spaced perfectly, like if one thing moved an inch, the whole room would collapse. It didn't feel like a living space. It felt like a display. Taeyun stood in the middle of the room with his hands on his hips, shoulders tight. When he turned, he looked different. Not smug. Not guarded. Just tired. We worked. Quietly. Pen scratching. Laptop fan humming too loud. After a while, I realized he kept glancing at me. Not staring. Checking. Like he needed to confirm I was still there. "Your house is quiet," I said finally. He huffed a small laugh. "It always is. No siblings." "No. Your parents." He shrugged. "Busy." That word again. Busy. Like it explained everything. I asked if that's why he wanted to work here. He said, "Here I can control the silence." That sentence didn't sit right in my chest. Later he asked, "Do you hate me?" I answered honestly. "I used to." He nodded like he'd expected that. Like it confirmed something. Then he said, "You think I've changed?" I said, "Enough." That was when he stepped closer. Too close. My brain latched onto something stupid. There was a tiny scuff on his sneaker, like he'd kicked something hard recently. I wondered what it was. I wondered if it hurt. "Who do you think I am?" he asked. I swallowed. Someone trapped. His hand brushed my wrist. Not accidental. Not aggressive. Just there. "You shouldn't say things like that," he murmured. "Why?" He didn't answer. He just looked at my mouth. I realized too late what was about to happen. The kiss wasn't gentle. It wasn't romantic. It felt urgent. Messy. Like he was grabbing onto something before it disappeared. When he pulled back, his face looked wrecked. "I shouldn't have done that," he said. "You wanted to?" I said quietly. "That's the problem." He paced, ran a hand through his hair. "I'm not allowed to want things that don't fit." The script. I asked before I could stop myself. He laughed, sharp and bitter. "Exactly." He talked then. About expectations. About being perfect. About being straight. About being someone his father could point at without shame. "I hate that I want you," he said suddenly. That sentence landed like a drop plate. "I hate that I feel normal. When I'm with you, I didn't know what to say. I just knew my chest hurt." When he leaned his head against my shoulder later, it felt wrong and right at the same time. Like crossing a line you didn't know was there until it was behind you. The next day, he texted again. "Do you need to talk?" "No." When I got there, he was pacing. "My dad found out," he said. "About the project, I assumed. About something safe." He shook his head. "About me." My stomach dropped. He said I'm weak. Taeyun continued. "That I'm ruining everything." He looked at me like he was waiting for confirmation. I told him he wasn't weak. I told him he was human. I told him he didn't deserve that. He leaned into me like he'd been waiting for permission to fall apart. And that was the moment I realized something that scared me more than the kiss ever did. I wasn't just involved anymore. I was the thing he was holding on to. And if he let go, I wasn't sure which of us would break first. Act 4. When private things go public, I didn't sleep. Not in the dramatic way people say that, like they were tossing and turning all night thinking about love. I stared at my ceiling until it started looking unfamiliar, like maybe I was in the dramatic way people say that, like they were tossing and turning all night thinking about love. I stared at my ceiling until it started looking unfamiliar, like maybe I was in the wrong room or the wrong life. Every few minutes, I checked my phone. Nothing. Then, sometime after 2, a message finally came through. Taeyun, thanks Dan for earlier. That was it. No explanation. No emoji. Just those 2 lines sitting there like that was it. No explanation. No emoji. Just those 2 lines sitting there like they weighed more than they should. I typed a reply 3 different times and deleted all of them. Everything sounded wrong. Too caring. Too cold. Too much like I was already in deeper than I wanted to admit. I left it on read. By Monday morning, the campus fell off. Not hostile. Not dramatic. Just watchful. Like when you walk into a room and everyone's pretending they weren't just talking about you. I caught people glancing at me, then away. A couple of whispers stopped mid-sentence when I passed. Someone I barely knew nodded at me, like we shared a secret. I hated that one the most. Taehyun didn't come to class. That scared me more than if he had. By lunch, Sunho slid into the seat across from me, dropped his tray, and leaned in close. Hey, he said quietly. Did something happen between you and CO Taehyun? My stomach sank. Why? He hesitated. Because the video's back. I stared at him. What video? He pulled out his phone and turned the screen toward me. It was the hallway kiss. Again, same angle, same awful timing. But this time, there were captions. Slowed down edits. Commentary layered on top, like it was entertainment. One clip zoomed in on Taehyun's face right after the show. Someone had circled his expression in red and added, "Look at him panic." My chest tightened. It's spreading again, Sunho said. Different forms. Some alumni group picked it up. People are speculating. Speculating, right? About his sexuality, about mine, about whether it was stage, about whether he was being corrupted. I didn't finish lunch. I found Taehyun outside the Humanities building an hour later, sitting on the steps with his elbows on his knees, phone in his hands, not looking at anything. He looked like he'd been there a while. They brought it back, I said. I know, he replied flat. He didn't look surprised. He looked resigned, which somehow felt worse. My dad called, he added, still not looking at me. I sat down next to him. The stone steps were cold through my jeans. What did he say? Taehyun laughed once, short and humorless. He asked if I was trying to embarrass the family or if I just lost control completely. I winced. That's impressive wording. He wants me to make it stop, Taehyun continued. Publicly. Quickly. That word again. Publicly. I thought about the basement. About the trophies. About the way he'd leaned into me like he'd finally gotten tired of standing upright. And how does he suggest you do that? I asked. Taehyun finally looked at me. By saying it was a misunderstanding, he said. That you crossed the line. That I push you away because I'm not. He stopped himself, jaw tightening. Because I'm not like that. There it was. Clean. Simple. Brutal. My first instinct was anger. Sharp and immediate. The kind that makes you want to say something stupid and permanent. Instead, I said, and what do you want? He didn't answer right away. People passed by us. Students. Professors. Nobody stopped, but I could feel the awareness like static in the air. I want this to stop, he said finally. I want my life back. I nodded slowly. Okay. He blinked. Okay. I shrugged, trying not to sound like my chest wasn't caving in a little. That's fair. Silence settled between us again. Heavy. Unresolved. You don't look relieved, he said. I'm not, I replied. But I get it. He rubbed his face with both hands. I don't know how to do this without wrecking everything. I thought about saying you already are. I didn't. Later that afternoon, Professor Min asked to see us after class. That was when it stopped being hypothetical. He shut the door behind us and leaned against his desk, arms crossed. I'm not interested in gossip, he said. But when it starts interfering with academic focus, it becomes my problem. Taehyun stared at the floor. I've been asked to make a statement. Professor Min continued, clarifying the situation. For the sake of the department, my throat went dry. A statement, I echoed. Just something brief, he said. No drama. No spectacle. Taehyun nodded immediately. Too quickly. I can do that, he said. No drama. No spectacle. Taehyun nodded immediately. Too quickly. I can do that, he said. Professor Min looked at him for a long second, then at me. Good. When we stepped into the hallway afterward, Taehyun exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for days. "I'll take care of it," he said. "How?" I asked. He hesitated. "Just a beat too long. I'll say what they want me to say." That night, my phone buzzed. A campus announcement. Shared everywhere. Screenshots already flying. Seotan's statement was short, polite, controlled. He said the incident had been misinterpreted, that emotions ran high, that he valued professionalism and boundaries. He didn't mention my name, but he didn't protect me either. I lay back on my bed and stared at the ceiling again, feeling something hollow out slowly behind my ribs. I knew he hadn't done it to hurt me, but knowing that didn't make it hurt less. And when my phone buzzed again, just minutes later, with a message from him. "Taehyun, I'm sorry." I realized something I hadn't let myself think until then. This wasn't about choosing each other anymore. It was about whether we'd survive the choice he just made. Act 5, nobody wins clean. I didn't reply to his message. Not because I was being strong, or dramatic, or principled. I just didn't know what to say without sounding pathetic. I read the statement 3 times. Then a fourth, slower, like maybe I'd missed something between the lines. I hadn't. It was clean. Too clean. The kind of clean that looks good on screenshots and awful when you're the one standing in a mess afterward. He hadn't blamed me directly, but he had not blamed me either. It was like he'd stepped half a foot back and let gravity do the rest. I turned my phone face down and stared at the crack in my ceiling that looks vaguely like a lightning bolt if you squint. I counted how many times my neighbor's AC unit kicked on and off. 12, 13. I stopped counting when it started to feel stupid. By the next morning, campus had decided who I was. Some people avoided me completely, like proximity was contagious. Others stared too long, curious in that gross, detached way. A guy in my statistics class asked if the kiss was for clout. I laughed because I didn't know what else to do, then immediately hated myself for laughing. Sunho walked me to class without asking. Didn't say much either. Just stayed there like a guard dog who didn't need instructions. Taehyun didn't come. When he finally texted again, it wasn't an apology this time. "Hyun, can we talk?" I stared at the message until my screen dimmed. I almost said no. What stopped me wasn't hope. It was irritation, the kind that builds when something unfinished keeps poking at you. We met where no one would look too closely. The back stairwell near the arts building. It smelled like dust and old paint and someone's forgotten lunch. He looked worse. Not in a dramatic movie way. Just run down. Hoodie wrinkled. Dark circles under his eyes like he'd been grinding his teeth instead of sleeping. "I didn't want it to go like that," he said immediately. I leaned against the wall. But it did. He nodded. Once, like he'd already accepted that answer. "They're watching everything I do," he added. "My dad. The department. Alumni donors I didn't even know existed until yesterday." "That sounds exhausting," I said and meant it. "He win once you're allowed to be mad." I replied then, after a second. "I'm also just tired." That surprised him. I could tell people expect anger, they know how to deal with it. He rubbed his hands together, nervous habit. If I hadn't said anything, it would have gotten worse. "For you," I said. He didn't argue. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," he continued. "I just didn't want you to think I did it because you didn't matter." I laughed. It came out wrong. Short. Dry. "That's kind of the problem, Taehyun. You didn't do it because I mattered. You did it because everything else mattered more." The words hung there, heavier than I'd planned. He looked down at the floor. There was a chip in the tile between his shoes. I wondered how long it had been there. "You're right," he said quietly. That was it. No excuses. No speech. I felt something in me loosen, just a little. Not relief. Just less tension. "I don't regret what happened," he added softer now. "I regret that I wasn't brave enough to stand in it with you." I believed him. That was the worst part. "I can't do this halfway," I said. "I can't be your secret stress relief while you clean up your image." "I know," he said. "I don't want that either." We stood there, awkward and unsure, like two people who'd walked into the wrong room and didn't know how to leave without drawing attention. "So what now?" I asked. He hesitated, long enough that I knew the answer wasn't satisfying. "I don't know," he admitted. "I'm trying to figure out how to live without following a script. Turns out they don't teach that." I snorted. Shocking oversight. He smiled, small and tired. "We didn't kiss. We didn't hug. That felt important somehow. like we were finally not rushing to make it mean something. When we parted, it wasn't dramatic. Just a nod, a shared look that said this mattered, even if it didn't work the way we wanted. Campus didn't magically forgive me. The rumors faded slowly, unevenly. Some people apologized later. Some didn't. Life kept moving, which felt rude at the time, but comforting in hindsight. Taeyun stopped being untouchable. Not ruined. Just human. People noticed. Some respected it. Some didn't. We didn't end up together. Not in the way stories like The Promise. But sometimes when I pass the debate hall and hear his voice through the door, less polished now, more real, I feel this quiet, strange sense of pride. Not because I saved him, because for a moment, we both stopped pretending. And that was enough to change us. If you want an epilogue later, older, quieter, maybe a reunion that a little bittersweet, we can do that. But this is where the story actually ends. Do that. But this is where the story actually ends. Epilogue, a normal day years later. I almost didn't recognize him. That sounds dramatic, but it wasn't. It was more like that moment when you see someone familiar from a distance and your brain keeps flipping through old folders trying to place the face. I was standing in line at a convenience store near campus, one of those places that smells like instant noodles and floor cleaner no matter what time of day it is, arguing with myself over whether I really needed another coffee. Then I heard his voice. Not polished, not projected, just normal. I turned, and there he was, paying for something I couldn't see because the rack of cheap umbrellas was in the way. Because the rack of cheap umbrellas was in the way. See ocean. Older. Softer around the edges. No blazer. No perfect posture. Just jeans, a hoodie, hair slightly too long like he'd stopped caring what his dad thought about it. He noticed me about 2 seconds later. That pause, that's the part people don't talk about. The tiny awkward beat where you're both thinking, is it okay to acknowledge this? Hey, he said. Hey, I replied. We stood there like idiots for a moment, blocking the aisle, until a cashier cleared their throat in that very aggressive retail way. Outside, the air was colder than I expected. The sky had that dull gray color that means it might rain, but probably won't bother committing. How have you been? He asked. I shrugged. Alive? Employed. Still bad at remembering reusable bags. He smiled. A real one. Less practiced. More earned. We didn't talk about the kiss, or the video, or the statement. Not directly. We talked about boring things instead. Work, rent, how the campus cafeteria somehow still hadn't improved. At one point, he said, I quit the debate circuit. Yeah, I said, miss it. He thought about it. Sometimes. Mostly, I don't miss who I was while doing it. That felt, right? When we said goodbye, there was no tension, no longing pause, just a quiet understanding that we'd already said the important things, even if we hadn't used the right words at the time. I walked home thinking about how strange it is, how something that once felt like the center of your life can shrink into a memory you without pain. Not erased, just settled. I don't regret what happened. I regret the confusion, maybe the fallout, the parts where we hurt each other by trying to survive. But I don't regret him. And if you've made it this far, listening to all of this, thanks. Seriously, stories like this don't always get told because they don't end neatly. They don't promise forever. They just promise honesty. If you want more stories like this, messy, quiet, human ones, go ahead and subscribe. Stick around. I've got more to tell. And some of them, they hurt way worse than this one. But they're worth it too.